What do we mean by the term competition? There are actually two ironically, competing meanings of the term competition used in economics. One is a minority view and the other is the majority view. A minority of economists in the 20th century mean by competition a struggle between opponents to achieve some goal. This is closer to the layperson's meaning of competition, and it's also very similar to the notion of competition that you'll find held by people in marketing and management. The focus here is on the activity. So you think of it as like a boxing match, for example, or a running race, for example. These are competitions where you will have rivals battling it out to win some prize or other. So in economic terms, we would say that it's a fight between firms for example, for customers, for market share. And that might involve cutting prices, providing better service than your rivals, coming up with persuasive advertising to steal customers from rivals, or some kind of product innovation, coming up with a new kind of product to entice more customers to your business. It doesn't really matter for this definition how many firms there are exactly, and it doesn't really matter how evenly matched they are. That's not the essence of a competition or a struggle on this view. So much like in a boxing match or a running race, it doesn't matter how many people are in the running race. As long as there's at least two people struggling to win, then you've got a competition. It doesn't really matter either whether they're identical people in some way. In fact, part of the thrill of a competition is that the people might not be evenly matched. One of them is going to presumably win. So being evenly matched is not really that important to this notion. What really matters is that there's simply a struggle between them. Maybe even a struggle to the death as far as firms go. What's desirable about competition on this view is that it motivates a process of discovery. A discovery of what? There's the attempt to discover the preferences of consumers. No firm will sit satisfied just doling out whatever it likes to consumers, irrespective of what their personal preferences are. In a competition, in a struggle for customers, you will seek to find out what the consumer's preferences are and satisfy them to the best extent you can. It's a search for, and ultimately the discovery of, the lowest cost way of producing something. And it might be, from the perspective of the consumers, the discovery of the lowest prices being offered in the marketplace by different firms. Again, from the firm perspective, it might motivate technological innovation, the search for and the discovery of a new way of producing goods and services that's more efficient than rivals in order to gain advantage. And product innovation, coming up with new and better products to better satisfy consumers' needs and to entice them, tickle their fancy in some way. This wouldn't occur if there weren't a struggle between rivals, if there weren't competition in this sense. It's only when there is just one firm in the market, a monopoly, that there is no struggle or no competition. And this is undesirable, not in and of itself, and not because the monopoly might be able to charge high prices and gouge profits out of customers, but rather because there's no motivation for discovery in this case. There's no motivation to try and find what do the customers really want, try and produce at the lowest possible cost, try and come up with some kind of technological innovation, to try and come up with some new and better product. There's no motivation behind that if there is no struggle or competition, when there's only one firm in the market. And that's why these economists who hold this view don't like monopolies that much. Now, that's the minority view. The majority view amongst economists is something in some ways, quite different. It's really about not so much the activity or the process of struggle and discovery of new information, but rather it's a question of categorizing. That is to say, how many rivals are there in the marketplace, and how evenly matched are those rivals? So when we think of it in this way, we can think of a continuum of competition, ranging from one extreme, no competition, to the other extreme, where you would have perfect competition, for example. So the greater the number of firms, on this view, the greater the number of firms, the more competitive the market is. And the more evenly matched the firms are, the more competitive the market is. Now, if we assume that all firms are seeking to maximize profit, and that's a reasonable assumption, so they all have the same goal that they're striving for, we can think of some examples to tease out the meaning of this notion of competition. So if you had a market where there were 10 equally sized firms, this would be more competitive, a more competitive market, than one in which there were 5 equally sized firms. Because there's more firms in the market, therefore it's more competitive. A market in which there are, if we compare 2 firms where there's 10 firms in each, but in one of the markets, there's 9 small-sized firms and then 1 large dominant firm which has the majority of the market share. That would be less competitive than an alternative market in which there's 10 equally sized firms. So you can see that how evenly matched the firms are is another marker of how competitive the market is. And at one extreme, we can have a market in which there is only one unique firm. We would say this is a perfectly uncompetitive market. And yet at the other extreme, we could say a market in which there is an extremely large number of firms, and all of those firms are identical. This would be a perfectly competitive market. This notion of competition feeds into the concept of market structures, and that's what we'll look at in another video.